Hello, everybody, and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Wednesday, the 29th of April. Today, I want to talk about something um, kind of odd, the wording, but it really struck my imagination, caught my fancy. I was having an online meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we were doing something called gospel based discipleship, and that's a form of Bible study in which you listen to the gospel of the day or a story, and you ask a few questions. So you listen to it the first time, say from the New Revised Standard Version, and you ask just a simple question, ask people not to answer, like not to expand on their answers, just what word or phrase caught your attention? What did you hear? Then you listen to the same reading from a different version of the Bible, King James version or the Message or the Way or something different. And then you ask, what do you hear Jesus saying to you? What are you hearing the gospel saying to your own heart as you listen to that passage again? And then you listen to it a third time, but from a third different version. And the question you're asked is, what are you called to do with this gospel? What is it that you're called from that phrase or that word that you heard and what you heard Jesus or the gospel speaking to you? What are you now called to do with it? How are you going to call to act on that? And somebody said something in our conversation about in the conversation about the gospel we had read, about, they used the word entangled, and this is not how they intended it, but this is how my brain works. That word entangled threw me into a different sphere. I will admit, I don't like admitting this, but I will admit I went someplace completely different and probably completely tuned out the rest of the conversation. But I went to a place where we become entangled. And I thought about the times when sometimes we're entangled. Like, when you have paper clips and somehow you put them in individually into a box or into a drawer. And when you go to take them out, they have somehow kinetically linked themselves all together. Like something happens, you put it in and you close the drawer and the gremlins get in. And well, it's like when you put your clothing in the dryer, and somehow your socks end up inside the sleeves of your sweater. Like these things they get entangled. Well, there's that kind of entanglement. And then I got thinking, my train of thought is like zip and zapping, it's like ADHD. I got thinking then about an entanglement, watching kids when I was the chaplain at Huron Church Camp, watching the kids um, having to do this game where somehow, I don't know whether it was one of those things where you take your shoes off and they all get put in a pile and you all have to go find your shoes. But all the kids got entangled in this pile. And a lot of the kids are kids that came from places where latchkey kids, parents weren't home, they let themselves in after school. Kids who didn't maybe have both parents or didn't have very affectionate homes. Kids who really, really missed physical touch. So as a chaplain, I would go in every night to the cabin, starting with the youngest. They had kids right from 6 years old, I think, up to like 13 or 14. And every camp all year, all summer. And I would go into each of the camps, the cabins, starting with the youngest, and I'd give them fist bumps or touch their hands or shake their hand, or sometimes they'd give me a hug, whatever they were comfortable with, to say goodnight to them. And not one kid by the end of each week of camp wasn't asking me for at minimum a fist bump, most often a hug. They were craving appropriate physical touch. They wanted to know they were loved. And so it was incredible watching these kids and when they were doing this game, and they had to be they literally had to become entangled, and then seeing them loving every minute of being like, hooks legs are hooked and elbows are hooked and they can't, they're struggling to get up and all those things. It was amazing watching the great fun they were having being entangled in this mess of bodies in this game. Completely appropriate, age appropriate game. Nothing nothing no misdeeds were being done. And I got thinking about entangling ourselves with the gospel, allowing ourselves to dive into the gospel, not worried about what we think, like what we've been taught in Sunday school or what we heard the preacher say last Sunday or what's been heard on that mega, turning point or something on YouTube, but really allowing ourselves to read the gospel and letting ourselves do what I did at that gospel-based discipleship, letting myself dive into something that wasn't necessarily the purpose, but allowing my brain and my heart and my soul to to get entangled and to fiddle around with that gospel, and what does it mean, and what are the possibilities, and how does this change me, or how does it not change me? How does it show that I'm on the right path, or maybe show me that I'm like completely off the right path and need to come back? But allowing myself to become completely entangled in the gospel, and knowing that even if I say, you know what, okay, I've spent the last X number of minutes in this gospel, in prayer, in study, and now I need to get on with the rest of my day, doesn't mean that we can't remain entangled in our heads and in our hearts with the gospel. I think that's a pretty encouraging thing, to be entangled with something beautiful. I mean, think about it. For teenage kids who are madly in love with their partner, who they're always entangled, they're always touching each other and hanging on each other, and that's a good thing. Well, for the most part it is anyway, but you know what I mean. It's a good thing to be entangled with something that's positive and loving and life-giving. So as you go about your day, I encourage you to pick up your Bible, and it doesn't have to be the gospel. It could be any part of the Bible. Um, Call up a friend, find an entanglement that will give you life. But I really do encourage you to start reading the Gospels, and pay it, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Just start there if you're new to the church, if you're new to the faith. If you don't know anything about it and you're not a believer, read them anyway, and just find out what this particular history book says. You might find you do get entangled with something that will change your life for the better. So go entangle yourself with the gospel. They're all four are different. John is like really theological. That's the fourth gospel. Um, Luke is stories, and he was a healer, things like that. Matthew and Mark's a bit shorter, more to the point. Matthew is more of a history guy, I think. I could be wrong. I'm just talking off the top of my head. But whatever your flavor is, whatever it is you'd love to do, dive in. I don't recommend, if you don't know things about Jesus, John can be a little bit overwhelming. So I recommend you start with Luke. He's my favorite sort of go-to for the Gospels. But anyway, go entangle yourself and enjoy your day. And let me know if you do entangle yourself. Let me know what that looks like. What did you get entangled with? What word, phrase, or sentence really caught your attention that you sort of ran with? Have a great day. God bless you. And I will see you again tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachel.